Most small organizations don't fail at vendor risk because they lack tools or questionnaires. Why vendor risk management fails in many small and mid-sized organizations? It is not due to lack of tools or awareness, but because risk decisions are not clearly owned, documented, or revisited over time. This visual shows the vendor risk ownership gap, where vendors' risk quietly breaks down. Vendor risk management is often treated as an administrative task rather than a decision system. Questionnaires are sent, responses are collected, and files are archived. What is missing is clarity around who is responsible for accepting risk, under what conditions, and for how long. The risk isn't invisible, the ownership is. When ownership is unclear, risk becomes implicit. Temporary approvals turn into permanent exposure, and organizations lose the ability to explain or defend past decisions when scrutiny arises. The vendor risk ownership gap describes the space between performing vendor risk activities and actually managing vendor risk. This gap forms when organizations collect information but fail to convert it into accountable decisions. There are 4 predictable failure points. First, it starts with vendor intake. What the vendor does, what data they access, and how critical they are. Vendors are often onboarded quickly to meet business needs. In many cases, there's limited discussion around data access, business criticality, or downstream exposure. Without structured intake criteria, early decisions are made informally without documentation. Next is risk assessment. Questionnaires are completed and controls are assumed. Assessments frequently rely on standardized questionnaires that capture yes or no responses. These responses are rarely weighted by business impact or risk tolerance. As a result, assessments provide a snapshot of stated controls rather than meaningful decision input. Then third, a risk decision is made. The vendor is approved for now. Exceptions are noted, and here's where things break. Risk ownership. Who accepted the risk? Under what conditions? And for how long? Exceptions are commonly granted to keep operations moving. When these exceptions are not explicitly documented or approved by a responsible owner, risk acceptance becomes implicit. Over time, the rationale behind decisions is lost. And finally, reassessment. Vendors change, access grows, but decisions aren't revisited. Without a clearly assigned owner, no one is responsible for revisiting risk decisions as the conditions change. Vendors' risk remains static while the environment evolves, increasing exposure. Effective vendor risk management does not require enterprise-level tooling. It requires clarity. Organizations must know who decides what was accepted, why it was accepted, and when it will be reviewed again. Small organizations operate with limited resources and cannot sustain complex governance models. Lightweight, repeatable decisions frameworks enable accountability without slowing the business. Risk clarity consistently outperforms complexity. When ownership is explicit and decisions are documented, vendor risk programs become defensible, scalable, and sustainable. If this helped you, subscribe for more compliance and vendor risk content. New videos are added every week. Thanks for watching.